And now for a cultural call-out. We sure don't appreciate that.
Today's cultural call-out is dealing with the idea of finding time versus making time for your worship. And this is something that I don't think is necessarily targeted to one specific area of the church. I think this is something that everyone in their own personal conversion has to confront at some point. But I would like to lead with a little bit of a story. So there was one time, it was a fasted testimony meeting, and there was this young mother that got up and she said, I'm having a really hard time finding time to make it to the temple and finding time to do all of the small things because I have really small kids. I've got 2 kids and they take up all of my time and I literally cannot do any more. But I can pray for other people that do have time, that they can have good experiences. And I remember hearing that and thinking to myself, something about that seemed a little bit off. And I'm not trying to come down on this gal. I absolutely understand how difficult it can be to have young children. I've got plenty of them. And they are taxing on your time. However, I do want to point out that if you're waiting to find time for your worship, you're going to be waiting for a really long time. Like, if I waited 100%. To find time for my worship, I would still be waiting. I am still looking for that time, wherever it is. But let's get your thoughts on this, and then I'll give some of mine.
Well, yeah, if you wait to just have time open up for your worship, I'm going to put that right next to the time that I'm waiting to have hobbies. Like it just doesn't work out. I really am glad that this lady is starting there by finding time to actually pray for others to go to the temple. Because what she's doing is she doesn't realize it, but she's actually making time to pray, which is going to eventually be that seed that'll grow into making time to go to the temple.
Right.
It is very difficult, especially if you don't have like a strong support system around, to find babysitters, to find people you trust that can be with your kids so you can go to the temple. But there is also the misconception that you need to go with your spouse. That's a great date night if you can, but if you can't, you can fly solo. That's most often what we do, right? One stays
the tag
home
team
while the other
approach.
goes to the temple.
It's the only way we're able to make it consistently. Fortunately, we live close to a temple, and so we're still able, like even outside of Utah, we're still able to make it pretty consistently to the temple. But the only way we're able to do it is by one of us staying home and the other goes. We don't have any family out here. And we aren't Warren Buffett, so we don't have oodles of cash to pay for babysitters. So one of us will stay home while the other one goes, and we just trade off every other week. And it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, with babysitting, I mean, I have 5 kids. I know you have just as many, right? Like to pay someone to watch them for 3 to 4 hours, which is usually what a complete, comfortable temple experience takes, is a lot of money. That's a lot.
It's not nothing.
Money that gets back of it. No. So we try and make it like, it's a dad night, right? We're going to have a party with dad. We're going to have a party with mom while dad goes to the temple. There's things like that, and something that we need to keep doing on our side, because it's something that I fall behind frequently if you don't mentally put in that effort. Because it's a version of social entropy, essentially. Like if you don't put your worship first, it will just naturally erode. Anything that you don't put active effort into is just going to fall by the wayside, especially when you have children, because they are constantly very loudly telling you what they need all the time. So they naturally shift.
They demand your attention. Yeah.
Their top priority, because if you don't feed them, they will scream at you, right? Like if you don't take care of them, the consequences are immediate of that.
Yeah, they'll scream at you even if they're full. Like they just like screaming.
Yeah, once I gave my daughter a cup of milk, and she screamed at me for giving her the cup of milk that she asked for. Sometimes
I got in trouble once just for dancing in the kitchen. My toddler was just like, "No dancing." So, like a good dad,
cut that out.
I had to start dancing even harder. I'm like,
yeah, you got to lean into that.
I'm the top dog in this house, all right, And mid dance, I was just like, I never would I ever have imagined that I would get into a situation like this, having a power struggle dance off with my toddler. But as I was moonwalking across the kitchen, I was just like, you know what? This is just one of those fun moments of parenting, and I'm just going to love it.
Well, it went from a simple dance to an act of asserting dominance, right?
That's right.
Like it became a ritual really quick.
Yeah.
Which, hey, like that's one of the most peaceful and happy ways to do it. So good job there.
Yeah.
But I think that yeah, if you worship, personal spiritual development is probably the easiest thing to put aside, to put away, and to kick that can down the road. Because no one's going to hold you accountable to that. No one's going to be, popping in, sending you a text, waking you up saying, "Where's your spirituality at today?"
Yeah.
Like the kids
Yeah.
are when they're sick or coughing, and you have to go and tend to them. It's
Well, it's
something
kind of
that,
like the idea of like going to the gym, saying, I'm going to go
yeah,
exercise and take care of my health when I find time. And you're never going to find that time. That time just never opens up. If you're living a busy life, which a lot of people are, if you're married, you've got kids, or even if you're not, life is demanding.
oh yeah,
And those things are very easily pushed off to the side. And eventually that can erode all of your muscles. It can lead to some pretty dangerous health conditions as well. And so I kind of view it the same way, where if you want to stay spiritually healthy, you're going to need to dedicate that time to put in the reps and to build those spiritual muscles. And for some
oh
people,
absolutely,
I mean, it looks different for everybody. I had a stake president once who issued a challenge to everybody. He said, I want you guys to get out a kitchen timer, set it to 30 minutes, and spend 30 minutes every single day studying your scriptures. And at the time, I had been spending maybe like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And so I looked at 30 minutes. I was like, is he mad? 30 minutes?
that's crazy.
That's insane. But I started doing it. And as I did it, I realized that A, my days were going much better. B, my attitude and my mood, my behavior was way better. I felt happier. I felt more peace. I felt more in control, of my life. I felt more connected to God. I felt closer to my wife. I felt closer to my children. I realized that I was, like what President Henry B. Eyring was saying, investing in things that were paying me spiritual dividends instead of
Oh
just
yeah,
spending my time on things that weren't going to pay me back. So it became an investment to me, to the point where it is now kind of more painful for me to not do that, to worship, than it is to just ignore it. I'm not saying that everyone has to go out there and immediately start at 30 minutes. If you're not used to that, just go start at like 5 minutes. Set a timer though.
oh
Set
yeah.
5 minutes, just spend 5 minutes reading. We have so much material out there. There are conference talks, there's teachings of the presidents, there's saints, there are come follow me manuals, there's all of the scriptures. There is so much content out there that can uplift, inspire, encourage, and help you navigate through life. And so I highly recommend spending that time and making it a priority and sacrificing for that time.
Yeah,
You
'cause
look
what
like
you're
you're going to
really
say something. What
doing,
are you going to say?
yeah, because I mean, I tried that challenge recently to increase my study time, and I get like 5 minutes in, I look at the clock, I'm like, oh man, this is harder than I remember it being. But
Yeah.
because the reality behind that, what's really happening is that everything that I need to do is stacking up in my mind, like a very poorly played game of Tetris. Like it's all just like
Mm,
weighing on the back of my mind the longer I'm taking time not dealing with the immediate needs. But as you read your scriptures and as you focus on giving that dedicated time, there's nothing magical about 30 minutes. There's no like magical spiritual bling that'll happen and then you'll
right. The
get,
timer goes
spirit
off
points.
and bing. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got spirit points for the day, but that doesn't happen. But what you're doing is you're training your mind to fend off the other things that are pressing on it, and thus organizing the rest of your day to a certain extent. Because you're staving off those intrusive thoughts are saying you shouldn't do this. You should go. You should be working. You should be cleaning. You should be
Yeah. You
anything
got
else.
projects. You got to-do lists. Yeah.
Oh, even down to like, you should be playing with your children. Why aren't you playing with your children? You should be a better father. Like you can find any justification for not taking time to, retreating to your room and reading your scriptures. But if you really block that time out, like you'll find that everything else will start to fall in its place just by practicing that mental skill of organizing your day like that.
Yeah. Well, because what it is you're actually dedicating time to nurturing your relationship with God. And
Absolutely.
it's just like any other relationship that you have. So if you had that same mentality with your wife, or your children saying, I'm only going to, if I can find the time, nurture and strengthen those relationships. You're going to be like one of those Christmas movie sitcom dads from the 90s, who had to quit his job so that he could make it to little Timmy's soccer game or whatever.
Just to make an impact. Mm-hmm.
In the spirit of Christmas. That's where that leads, is where you become so consumed with the world that your relationships just kind of suffer the negative consequences of neglect. Where that has an impact on everyone in your family. So I kind of view it a little bit differently, where I view that time that I spend in worship as time that makes the rest of my time with my family more meaningful and more impactful, because they're going to be dealing with a kinder, more patient, more peace-filled father figure instead of me without that, which is more likely to be anxious or looking at the time or stressed out or constantly nitpicky or stressed or, what have you.
100. Yeah. The peace that comes with, connecting with God cannot be matched, for sure. That is definitely the fruit that you harvest from that study. I have a lot of friends where I only get back to them texting wise when I have a moment. And so it's like once every 2 or 3 weeks, and we just have that relationship. They are good friends, and I like talking with them, but it's just not as a priority in my other life. It's, in my busy life, it's not what it should be. But with, that's the last thing you want to that point, your relationship with God to be, is something where you just check in every now and then to make sure you're both alive, and then move on. Because that's not someone that you can deservedly call on in time of need. To those, to those friends who I only text once a month, I can't call them on the phone and say, can you come here and help me right now? We just don't have that kind of relationship. I haven't invested enough into it to get that kind of return. And some of them might do it, actually, but it would definitely shift the relationship. The same thing applies to your relationship with God. If you want to call on God in those times of needs, you have to be there when, and give him time. You have to make that time for him.
Yeah. It's kind of like the idea of a farmer. Like, he has to get his seeds planted in the ground at a very specific time of the year. He has to make it a priority, or else he can't harvest the fruits of his labor. And so it's that same idea there. You need to be spending that time conscientiously nurturing that relationship, so that when you need the fruits of that relationship, you can harvest them, which is great, and that's something, like, you don't want to work on your marriage when it's in crisis. Like, that is the best time to do it is
late.
Yesterday. Yeah. The next best time is right now.
Right now. Yeah.
Not tomorrow.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
To that point, like, bringing it back to this woman that you talked about, who says she believes that she can't find time. And there are a lot of people, through some periods of life, I've also believed that I couldn't find time. That it just requires like a mind shift. Support from the ward would be awesome in that, but it's not required, right? You can't depend on your ward to help you provide childcare or support. It's simply a decision for you as a disciple of Christ. Are you going to visit him in his house, right? Are you going to go to the temple? Are you going to, set time aside for scripture study? Are you going to pray? If you make that decision first and foremost, everything else will find its way into your life, because it's burrowing into your life. Everything else will take its pound of flesh. But if you give to God first, then you at least will have, spiritual dividends to harvest later.
Yeah. And to your point, every ward that I've been in, once they see that we have kids, I have at least 2 to 3 couples that approach us and say, hey, we love babysitting so that mom and dad can go to the temple. Please call on us if you guys want. And we take them up on it. Like, we are honestly like, yeah, we would love to do that. We take people up on that. And I understand that not every ward is going to be the same. I totally get that. That's fine. If you do have that resource in your ward, absolutely use it. Take these people up on that. Like, they're giving you an opportunity to be served. And that sometimes can be just as hard as serving somebody else. And so take that challenge, let people serve you, get to the house of the Lord, and you're going to find dividends because of that. The other piece that I wanted to touch down on, though, was like, not only is it helpful for you, but I believe that it is also helpful for your family when you're making time for the Lord, not just finding time. So when I was younger, there were multiple times when I would, be walking around the house when we were growing up, and I would stumble in on Dad deep in prayer, or Dad's studying his scriptures and things like that. And that was one of the big variables in my conversion, was seeing that he wasn't just teaching us and telling us to do this, but actually to accidentally stumble on him deep into this personal connection building with God that he was vested in. I would see that and think to myself, man, he's drinking his own Kool-Aid. Like, he's not doing this for anyone else. Like, he loves this.
Yeah.
Like, he's actually converted to this. He believes in this. And that was a big thing for me. And I think that can be just as big for your children and your children's children, is if they can see you making time and making those sacrifices in similar ways, not like in a big performative way or anything like that, but like if they can find you in a quiet moment, in a quiet place, studying your scriptures or saying your prayers, I think that can be a very big spiritual moment for them as well.
Yeah, well, I that was a very impressive thing for me as well, because I would wake up early to go print something off in the attic computer room, and their dad would be reading his scriptures on the couch. He had to get up early because he went to work very early, and he worked a lot and came home very late. And so, and it was never like something that he pressed upon us or anything like that. I'd go up there and say, "What you doing?" He's like, "Oh, just reading my scriptures," just starting his day right, which was very impressive to me. I read a study recently that said that the majority of children in the household will follow the father in his spiritual example.
Yeah.
Right. So
93%. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. 93%. So if you're not showing a visible example to your kids, which you don't have to, you shouldn't, like, I don't know, you can be weird about that if you want, but really, like, if you're just living your gospel life and practicing your religion, your kids will find you reading scriptures and studying and praying. And the better example as a father specifically you can give to them that way, the more likely they are to follow your example throughout their adult life as well. So yeah, that's highly important.
And I think as a closing argument on this, the idea of finding time for worship, I feel like that's just leaving something that's essential up to chance, and that's a high stakes game. So for that reason, we're calling out this cultural idea that can come up, and we're saying, ignore it, make time, don't wait for the time, you'll never find it. It's never going to be there. Even when you're older, it's just not going to be there. There's just too much to do, too much to worry about. Make that time, and you're going to see the benefits for it.